All right, let's review Detention challenge, which is your first React challenge. Scroll all the way to the bottom, Detention. So here's our Detention. We gotta fork it over to Tom, git clone, down here. So I already git cloned it, and I already git clone, already did that. And then I already did npm install or npx create React app detention. I already did that. So instead of wasting all the time waiting for it to download, I already pre-installed it. And it comes over here where it says detention. So here's our detention app. We have our public directory and our source directory, which is the main where we're going to store all our components and everything like that. So here's our index. This app component is injected into the index HTML in the root, and that's where our React app is. So here's our React app, or our app components. Let's first start by starting the React app. So npm start. Oh no, ls. So I have to cd into detention, clear, npm start, starting the React server. And we should get the little rotating atom. Does it rotate? There it is. So let's look at the requirements of detention. There's nothing like old-fashioned mental conditioning. In order to emphasize one of the most important rules in React, you'll write/render it 100 times. I will never mutate state or props directly. But this is what we want to avoid. You never just want to assign a variable or any data to state props directly. Class-based component state should only be modified using React Components setState method. Functional components state should only be modified using the useState method. So we're going to be creating class-based. We're going to do this challenge in using class-based components as well as functional components, just to get used to switching between both. So use the create React to scaffold app. We just did that. Now we need to write, I will never mutate state or props directly 100 times. I'll leave this, the release 2 for styling, up to you, or to you. I'm not going to jump into styling. Just want to get the core concepts of this React challenge down. So here I can delete all this. Oh, not that. I'm just going to do H1. Write 100 times. Save it. Right here. Write 100 times is here. I can get rid of this logo. Great. So in order to do this, see, we're using functional components. Functional component right now. And we want to render something 100 times. We want to render, what is this? What's this? Oh no. Coming down here, detention. Oh, there it is. Detention, we want to render this 100 times. So the whole point of components is to be able to reuse components, but like instead of literally doing this 100 times, which is not the correct way to do it, we want to render just this H1 or paragraph tag 100 times. To do that, there's a couple ways we can do that. So we'll do it one way without using a child component to render it, and then we'll actually create a child component and render that child component 100 times. So we can do const create for the the method. And here, I'm going to say let writings equals an empty array. And for let I, simple for loop, equals 0, I is less than 100, I plus plus. And then in this writing, I need to return writings.push, and I want to push in this tag. At the very end, I want to return the writings array. And since this is return, it's just all JSX, I can execute JavaScript in here by doing create board and executing that, which is going to return an array of these, which will all render. Let's see if that works. No, what happened? That not work. Create board. For elements. I just do this. There we go, sorry. We didn't want to return it because it only returns it once. So that makes sense. Okay, sorry. I didn't mean to return it right here. I meant to just keep push and then return the writings array. So it says warning. So this is rendered 100 times. I can even check that by doing like span here, do I, 0 to 99 times. So I'm just passing in I. Now, done that. That could be the end of it, but let's create it using a class-based component. Or first, let's actually create a child component to this and import it and then render it. Kind of similar to what we're doing here, except we want to create a separate component to handle the writing portion of it. So we're not passing in all that. How do we do that? In our source, we need to create another folder called components. And in here, let's just create a file called chalkboard.js. And let's make this a functional component. Chalkboard. We don't need to pass in props yet, I don't think. So, might think about it. Let's pass this in chalkboard. Let's get rid of the span for right now. Let's see. So we have this chalkboard functional component. We're not taking in any props yet. And we're just literally returning this h1. I will never mutate state or props directly. Now we need to import that into this function, or this component. So import chalkboard from components.chalkboard. And now, instead of writing all that like h1 here, we can just render, or we can just push the chalkboard component into this writings array that will have an array, console login, of writings. So writing, so right there. Now, everything stays the same, except again, we get this, each child in a list should have a unique key property. So we can pass down props like key equals just the index. So that's all we need. And here we're rendering that array, or we're console logging that array of writings that has 100 chalkboards in it. See it right here. This is what a component looks like. You don't really need to know about all this like type. Here's props. There's a key, 0, key 1. Cool. We don't need a set state. We don't need to have an on-click event to render everything. We just want to render something 100 times, or however many times we pass in it. We can do it in 100, and we can do it in number. So in this, I refactored this create board function to take in a parameter of the number of times we want to render it. So if we only want to render it 5 times, we pass it 5. We should only render it 5 times. So we have a functional component. We have a functional component. Now let's do it using class-based components. And in doing so, we can come down here, comment this out, switch it to func class component. We need to do class app extends component, which we need to import components from React. We don't need, since now this is a class, we're missing the render function that all class components render at the very end, which returns this JSX right here. And since this is a class component now, we can't declare variables within the class components, like between render and where we actually declare the class component. We can just turn something off. All right, there we go. We can just call create board. And have some failed to compile, so it all updates in real time. Line 42, space 9, create board is not defined. 42, create board is not defined. So again, we're using class, creating a class component, which needs this used throughout. And there we go, we have that. If I were to just create this as a normal function, we have this create board is not a function because we need to bind this function. Oh, that's not going to work. So, got ahead of myself, but we'll get to that binding if we run into it again or later. So created a class component app, executes the same way as this functional, just a little bit differently, using a class versus a function. Let's create this chalkboard functional component, convert it to a class component. Class chalkboard extends component. We import the component from React, and at the very end we need to render function that returns JSX, which we're going to move into the render. Everything's the same. So that is writing I will never mutate states or props, state or props directly 100 times. If we want, go down to here, or however many times we want. We can also pass in props like key. Let's see if this works. Go back to a functional component, pass in props, console log props, component is defined, not used. So props is empty right now. If we wanted to, chalkboard key, we can say like number equals I plus 1. Here's our number property. So we're passing in number into the chalkboard component as a property. In the chalkboard functional component, taken props, or console logging props, which is an object, with key number, and the value is index plus 1. You can do destructuring by number. Now we can actually use this. Span number. I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It says component. That's fine. We wrote it 100 times. That is detention. So I'm going to stop the recording right there. Then we'll jump into the other challenges.